I will call the December 7th, 2021 Financial Affairs Committee of the Cheltenham School Board to order. And we'll start with a roll call. I'll call you out as I see you on my screen. Mr. Epps.
Present.
Ms. Mulhern.
Here.
Mr. Schultz.
Present.
Mr. Cohen.
Present.
Ms. Lohman.
Here.
Ms. Haywood.
Present.
Mr. Burdell Williams.
Present.
And Ms. Henry.
Present.
Thank you. I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the last Financial Affairs Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve, Ms. Haywood.
Second, Ms. Lohman.
Mr. Schultz, would you like to add anything for the record before we approve the minutes?
Mr. Cohen's got his hand up, so I'll defer to him first. Mr. Cohen, if you want to carry my torch while you talk, then great.
Okay, great. Before I do that, two items related to number 2, the WRDA. The one is for the public, which probably does not know what WRDA stands for. If that could also go in the minutes, local economic revitalization tax assistance. That's local economic revitalization tax assistance. And also with number 2, to give reference to Ms. Elliott in terms of who she is. I believe it'd be good served stating that she's the assistant township manager to give some context and indication where she's from. And in terms of Mr. Schultz's offer, if we could have the relevant links in terms of the synopsis of the meeting and also the video of the meeting added to the minutes, that would be welcome as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Schultz, did you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the approving the minutes as the amended by the suggestions of Mr. Cohen? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. And I will be turning the meeting over now to Mr. Linderman.
Mr. Lindeman, you are on mute. We can't see
Yeah.
you, so I don't know if you're talking.
Okay, I'm on. Okay, here I am. So sorry about that. It's your pictures are in my way here. So good evening and
Not a new problem.
so congratulations to the new board members and the returning board members and the existing board members. So tonight we got some things to discuss. I'm going to just kind of skip through the mission statement and vision statement. Tonight our agenda is it looks kind of ominous, but it shouldn't be too awful long. I don't think. We'll review the expenditures, revenues and expenditures like we do. We're going to talk about the 2 audits. We will talk about the refinancing, which was finalized last week. We're going to, as promised, we're going to talk to you about the budget, the building and department allocations, along with some enrollment projections that we used for budgeting for next year and the allocations. And then we want to start some talks on the student activity funds, which are a minor issue as a result of the audit. So we'll get into that when we get to that part of the agenda. So here's your year-to-date revenues and expenditures. We seem to be right on track as we were in for this year for revenues. You'll be seeing a bigger jump in the federal revenues in the upcoming months as we start to actually take some of the allocations for the ESRA funds during this year after they're expended. The ESRA funding, as you probably are aware, is a reimbursement type grant. So we spend the money, then we tell them to give it to us, and they give it to us. Expenditures are pretty much right on track. So that's where we stand here. The audit, the 2020 audit is finalized. A copy of it is attached. It'll be in the public portion of the board docs, and we will put a copy of it on the business office website, which it always goes to. Also, the 6/30/2021 audit. Ms. Kim, who's on the call or on the Zoom with me tonight, I promised I wouldn't make her talk too much, and I'll only ask her to talk if you guys ask me a hard question that I can't answer. And she's working diligently on the 6/30/2021 audit, and we have an estimated date of, I put 12/31 there. It'll be before the holidays, and that will bring us pretty much back into line with the auditing and AFR timeframes that we were, Cheltenham's been kind of out of whack on for the past year or two. So as you know, we should not be showing the final audit for 2020 in almost 2022. That should have been shown at the very latest January of 2021. And our hope is to have you a final report in January of 2021 for the or 2022 for the audit of 2021. Now, for some good news, we did refinance the bonds. We've done some things with the bonds over since the last meeting. We had our rating call with Standard & Poor's. They affirmed our rating and actually called Cheltenham stable. That's a good thing. That's kind of like the person that says you're doing okay, whereas some people say you're doing great. So affirmed and stable is actually what I would call great, but the kind of rating people, they call it, that's good. The bonds were marketed on last week on the 30th, and was actually kind of a pretty perfect day to market them. The stock market was actually down that day, so and any of you guys, and me included, who were watching your retirement portfolio go down, the bonds were actually benefiting in that. The initial pricing on the bonds actually got reduced that day, which was good. That's a good thing. Some of the rates were reduced because there was a high demand for your bonds. You did do a parameters resolution. I'll jump back to that in June of 2021. And the parameters resolution basically said, if you're going to save this amount of money, you're going to go to, you gave permission for the PFM and the RBC people to go and do this. So we did this. Now, these bonds technically don't settle till February of 2022. That's when they are callable, and that's when they can call, but these will get all set up and done in the meantime. This page here shows the savings on the bonds, and this is kind of right out of the report we got from the finance people. So you saved just under $1 million, $960,000. It's not a all upfront savings. It is an equalized out savings in an attempt to more balance your debt in future years. You see, we will have an increase in debt for next year, even with the savings of about $300,000. And that's the way it fell from the last bond refinancing. But we have some pretty decent savings. This is nothing to feel bad about. This is a great savings. And it will kind of reduce your debt obligation over the next 13 years. It only goes out to 2035. That's when those bonds are actually due. So the last bonds will be sold in that final year. So that's your net debt service. The column on the right, or the blue column, will be what we use. Actually, you'll see a larger amount in the budget for the year, because you budget the expenditures on the full effort, what you actually pay on the bonds, and a difference of about a little less than 300,000 is for you get corresponding revenue reimbursement on bonds from the state. So any questions on the bond financing before I jump, or do you want me to just wait till the end there, Joel? I'll take that as a wait till the end.
I see no hands raised, so
Okay.
you can wait till the end.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the budget. We did some enrollment projections for you preliminarily, and I will go over the methodology for them, and I'll share with you some of the higher level projected enrollment. Dr. Scriven and I have talked about the possibility of getting a more elaborate enrollment study for Cheltenham done, either through the Montgomery County offices of, I think you have a demographic office there, or there's firms like the Pennsylvania Economy League in Harrisburg will do it also. So at a later discussion for a later finance committee meeting, we can discuss the need and the want to kind of get a more focused long-term enrollment projection for you. And then we're going to show you the building allocations for the year. They're actually uploaded into the board docs too for you. So, when I show you the screen there, it's going to be hard to read, but you'll see. And Lou and I have met with every building principal, and we've met with every department head to review the budgets and start the budget process. This budget process would have started probably about a month or a month and a half sooner, but you all know I didn't really start here till the end of September, and by the time we got things rolling, we were into November. So let's go about the enrollment projections. The methodology used for most enrollment projections of public schools across the country is called the cohort survival method. It's really just a math problem. So essentially, it is just taking the number of students that survive from one grade to the next, from one year to the next. So you're taking that cohort of students. So if 100 students are in kindergarten this year and 100 students are in first grade next year, that cohort becomes 100%. So you use that multiplier. And the cohort survival method will look at the number of students going from one grade to the other, matriculating, and you use a blended 3, 5, or 7 year average, depending on the type of district you have. If you're in a very quickly growing district with a lot of open space and a lot of developments going on, you may use a 3-year method. If you're in a kind of build out, everything is concrete now, you may use 7 years. And if you're in between, you use 5. We use the 5 here for you guys, so it will depend on for Cheltenham. So it'll show you, and you'll see some cohort ratios are over 100%. That means students are moving in, or maybe moving back from non-publics, or maybe moving back from charter schools, and they may be lower than 100%. And I'll give you an example where I came from in Great Valley. We used to see a drop in our 6th grade enrollment, because that's when the students whose parents had kind of legacy private schools would send them down the main line to the private schools. So we would see a small drop, and maybe our survival ratio from 5th to 6th grade might have been 97 or 98%, whereas our survival ratio in kindergarten, from kindergarten to first grade, we used to see in excess of 100%, because up until about 4 years ago, Great Valley only had a half-day kindergarten, so a lot of people put their students in a private kindergarten for a whole day. Then they'd bring them to Great Valley for first grade, and you'd see a large influx of upwards of 125% matriculating from kindergarten to first grade. To calculate the kindergarten numbers, it's the softest of all the numbers. You use a birth data average. So we have the birth data from all the zip codes within the Cheltenham Township, and you look at the number of students and you match them up with over the past of how many students were born, and then how many 5 years later actually came to kindergarten. And again, this is the most common method used in calculating enrollment by schools. And I will say it's because it's just a mathematical problem. So there's no, guessing at what's going on. You're just using math as your tool. So let's look at the enrollment projections. This is Cheltenham's, and one of the things you need to use for enrollment projections is you have a static enrollment. So most schools use either the third day of school or the 1st of October. We picked the 1st of October for you because that was what I could go back and get through your calculations and through your reporting to the state. So this shows the makeup of each grade level in Cheltenham from 2014-15 back down to 21-22, which is now yellow is the current school year. And then there's a projection 22-23 out to 26-27. You'll notice a decline. You've had a decline. You had a little spike this year, and you can get into the numbers and analyze it how you want. But longer term, you're going to have a decline, because if you look back at your kindergarten numbers, you had larger kindergarten numbers in the earlier years, say 14-15 to 17-18, and then they dropped, went up a little tiny bit this year, but you see that correspondingly goes up. So you're going to have some drops in numbers. Your elementary schools for next year look like they're going to go down probably 30 some students. Your 5-6 center will lose about 37 students. The middle school loses the most, Cedar Brook. And that's mainly because there's a very large 8th grade class in the middle school there. And you have a much smaller 6th grade class coming up. So, and depends on the ratio going down, you can see that. So again, just a math problem here for me. It's all simply math. And then we have some charts to show you. So this is the projected enrollment for Cheltenham over the next 5 years. It's the current enrollments on the left, and that's what the projection is, using a 5-year cohort survival calculation. And again, you had a little increase this year, which was good, but because of those numbers from kindergarten and first grade and the lower numbers for the past 3 or 4 years, they're going to start to kind of affect your upper grades. This is the elementary enrollment, which tends to level off a little bit here because you're getting into a number of years of the kindergarten numbers being a little bit lower. So you have you'll see a little flat line of them there. So so why did we do this? We did this because when we talked about the building budget allocations, we wanted to institute a more realistic approach to the way you budgeted for your schools and put it on a per pupil basis. So this per pupil basis here, we number one, I will tell you, your schools are pretty adequately budgeted for, no matter what people say. I've seen budgets from across the Philadelphia area, and I have to say most of your schools you're probably in the higher third of budgets for schools, maybe even higher than that in budgets, especially at like your high school and things like that. But nothing to be said. So we tried to adjust a little bit. There was some schools, the schools actually, most of them took a little reduction. The only one that got a little increase was Glenside. They are you take the projected enrollment in this model for budget allocations, and then you allocate based on the number of students, and you weight the students based on the grade level, because the younger grades, they tend to stay in their own classrooms a little more. So they are allocated with a 1.0. Kindergarten's actually a 0.75 because there's the more complicated curriculum type devices and things that get put into the upper grades, especially like the high school, where like your 5-6 center, we will give a weighted on each student of 1.1, and then there'll be a weighting on the 7-8 of like 1.2, and then the high school will be a little bit higher, like 1.35 or 1.4. And then each school got a small weighted on the gifted. Now the gifted numbers and the special ed numbers are not projected. They are based on this year's actual gifted and special ed, because we do not have a model like the cohort survival to project how many of these type students you have. So we give them the budget based on this year, on what their numbers are this year. Lou and Katie and I went to each building, met with the principals, went over what they needed to provide for us. Everybody's budgets are coming back to us on January 4th. We obviously won't have anything for you guys on the 4th because we're getting them on the 4th. But we are going to start in earnest working on the compiling and putting all the smaller budget data together. Now, in the realm of your whole budget, this $1.5 million is a very small portion of your budget. You know, it's you know, when you think about your budget, you know, 60-70% is staffing with salaries and benefits. You know, another 9 or 10% is debt service, and then you got transportation is probably 7-8%. Facilities is a big chunk, and really the discretional portion of your budget is very, very small. This is what they're working on. The principals are working. You know, if they're complaining there's too much to do, it's my fault. So sorry. But we're willing to help them. I mean, Lou and I are available to help them, and we're going to get them through this process and have them a little more ownership in their own budgets. We met with the department chair or the department leaders, you know, throughout the district, mainly in the district, you know, all in the district office. I call it a modified zero-based budgeting, because zero-based budgeting is just a buzzword where everybody thinks, okay, you have nothing and now you're going to have to budget and justify everything. Well, it's kind of a ridiculous point, because you can't do zero-based budgeting and maintenance, because you're always going to have, like, the electric bill is going to come in. I mean, and the water bill and things like that. So you have that in every department. Like, you can't zero-based budget truly the technology department. I mean, you got to pay for your internet provider, and you got to pay for your website hosting. So there's a lot of things that come, they will start in, but it's the other things that are needed. They are working on. Their budgets are coming back to us in January on the 4th also, and then we will be meeting, Dr. Scriven and Lou and I will be meeting with them, going over, and we'll be bringing you back their budgets sometime in February or March. And this is just the budget calendar as we kind of race through it here tonight. Basically the same thing you saw, almost the same thing you saw last month, just a little bit updated and moved. Student activity funds. One of the things we went over with the principals, and mainly this is the secondary level principals, or the monitoring and the real need to provide some more internal controls on how we monitor student activity funds. So we are using the student activity funds guide as done by PASBO. They actually did this guide years ago, and they continually update it. This one is, I believe, 2019. I can't read it on there. But about 20, 25 years ago, there was a big shakeup in the state because student activity funds were basically, it's one of those areas, it's the smallest amount of money that anybody deals with, even smaller than the principals budgets and things. But it's that money that deals with cash, and it's that money that deals with students. So we went over with the principals some of the guidelines from the Student Activity Funds Guide, reviewed. You have a board policy on it. You have a number of student activity fund accounts that are negatives. We're trying to investigate why that happened. They've apparently been negative for a number of years. Essentially, the basic premise of a student activity fund is, and this is what the Auditor General came out with, like I said, 20, 25 years ago, is student activity funds, it's really meant to run a club, whatever club it is. Call it the widget club. And you got a group of kids that want to do things, go to events, raise money. They raise money, they collect money, they go to things. Any money raised, any money expended in that year should all be raised and expended in that year for those students and not carried over. The only accounts that are allowed to carry over funds from year to year would be like your class of 2023, your class of 2024, and so on. And then in your policy, when they graduate, the day after they graduate, if they have not spent their money, they need to donate that to the incoming freshman class. That's your policy. Or before that time, they can say, okay, we want to buy something as a class gift to the high school. They can do that too. So, and there are some approval systems that need to be in place, like the students actually have to approve expenditures from the account along with the advisor and the principal. So we're doing that. Like I said, we're working with the negative balances. We've got some negative balances. We got some really big balances that shouldn't be there. So we've met with the principals. We are going to meet with each advisor of a club that has money with the principals over the next couple of weeks, and that'll probably have to go into even after the holidays because there's just a lot of them, and go over the process and the forms and all, and so if you hear any scuttlebutt on this, yes, this is a small thing, but it is a big thing. It's the things you read about in the newspaper if they're not done properly. So I mean, that's as quickly as I could go through the agenda with you, Joel. I'm ready for questions.
You, Chuck? I was going to say uncharacteristically, I don't see any hands raised, but Pam jumped in. Pam, Henry?
Yep, trying to get off mute. Thank you. Just have one question about the pupil allocations, those numbers. Did those projections in any way take into account the new development here in Cheltenham, Ashbourne Meadows? Are there any projections about the number of students that we might possibly be getting into the district?
Well, I did talk to the township on that. Originally, it was supposed to be an age appropriate development, so 55 plus. Now, I understand there's only 192 units, and 2/3 of them are townhomes, and 1/3 are single family dwellings. So typically, they did not do an impact study. They did not require an impact study for them, which is normally what's done. So we would see some numbers. But you're probably not going to get one pupil per unit. I'm just using this from past experience. You will be lucky to get a factor of 0.25 or 0.3 students out of all those units. Now, and just say you got 0.25 out of that, that might be 50 students, and that's 50 students K to 12. That's not 50 students all at Cheltenham Elementary School. Because yeah, I had a panic. Lou and I had a panic from our transportation guy. Oh my God, there's going to be 100 more kids at the Cheltenham Elementary School next year because of this. And I said, oh. So we talked to them. I would still like to get some more impact on there. They are building, from what I understand, they are building the townhomes first, which tend to be more, this is just from experience, and I have no experience in Cheltenham, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the townhome type tend to be moved into when they're brand new by what we used to call in the old days dinks, which are double income, no kids, and the single family dwellings. What we experienced here, no matter how expensive they were, we always seemed to get 2 or 3 kids out of each one. But time will tell. It is not a large development in the terms of some developments I've seen in my career. We had a 1,200 unit development right off the turnpike in Malvern that ended up with 300 students coming out of it. Again, more than what the impact study suggested, but not one per unit. So yeah, we're monitoring that, and I wish the township had made them do an impact study, because at least you get some numbers that are driven by some statistics nationwide on types of developments like that in similar areas like yours.
Henry, were you finished with your question?
Yep, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Linderman. A couple of questions in terms of the building and department budgets. How are they reconciled? Because I know, at the elementary school level, you're looking at really, I guess, a building budget because you don't really have departments there. But at the upper grade levels, both at the EP, Cedarbrook, and the high school, you have a combination of the building, possibly budget, and the department budgets, possibly for English or math or science, etc. How do you reconcile that throughout the district?
Well, every week we send each building gets their own building budget, which is broke down by department. So it's the principal's responsibility to break down and allocate part of that budget to each department as they are needed. Naturally, a department such as science may have a higher budget than a department such as language arts, because you're dealing with mainly books and paper versus some pretty heavy duty equipment that's in science that may cost a little more money to replace. Naturally, when we're in a curriculum revision cycle, Dr. Smith will be funding some of the replacement for the new curriculum materials that go into each of the grade levels, depending on what cycle we're in. And we talked about that last week when we had our budget meeting with her. So it's really, again, you're putting it back at the principal. They know where they need the money. They know they have to spend within what our parameters are and do the curriculum as set by the Cheltenham School Board. I mean, whatever your curriculum is and whatever your materials are. So, and again, because the high school, because the higher you get in grade levels, they become a little more complex curriculum wise, as far as even equipment and materials. It costs a lot more for AP books than it does for non-AP books. It's just the way it is. And if you're buying new microscopes, well, then you're spending a couple thousand each on those. So the principal has to deal with allocating and making sure and meeting with the department chairs and help and having them, kind of they have to help them understand too what they need in their budget. So again, this is another thing where I wish we had gotten this out a little bit earlier. You know, where I come from, I'm used to the principals meeting with their department chairs right after we have the meeting with the budget and saying, here's the preliminary allocations, that then the principal gives the allocations based on the allocation you have just given the building. The principal gives an allocation to the departments. And sometimes, you know, there's generally the principals will hold a small amount of money in an administrative level account that would be able to be kind of retransfer or transferred then to a department that may have an extraordinary expense that year.
Okay. And do we look, and I'm sure, you know, whatever is accounted for is probably utilized during the year, if that's kind of the requested budget, either at the building level or at the department level. But is there any kind of reconciliation between, you know, what is budgeted in the beginning of the year and actually what is spent, to really project maybe a different variation of that building or department budget prospectively?
Well, we monitor the budgets, you know, all the time. And again, you know, up until this allocation method that we're doing for this year, I'm not quite sure how you allocated your budgets. Essentially, if you looked at the allocation sheet, almost every elementary school got the same budget, even though some of them were a lot bigger than others. So we do look at that. We provide them with history. Lou has given them history for the past 5 years of what their budget's been and what they've expended. Some have expended more, some have expended less. So we're trying to get them into a mindset that, you know, this is their budget. They need to take ownership to it and accountability for it, and they need to run it like each building is a little business.
Okay. And my last question really is with respect to the projected enrollment. If I was looking at those statistics correctly, it looks like we, you know, are projecting over the next several years collectively a reduction of student enrollment of about 800 from what it was in 2014, 2015. That's a significant reduction of students within our school district. And while I know that we need to look at the needs of all of those students that are here, you know, now and in the future, you know, I just want to have a better sense of, as we continue and those projections, if they are accurate, that's a significant reduction. And so I think it's an opportunity for the administration to kind of look at the budget a little differently when we're not servicing as many students. But we do need to make sure that those students are getting the services that they need. So that just kind of really stuck out for me. That's a significant reduction in enrollment. And should obviously have a related reduction in budget.
It is a significant reduction in enrollment, and it probably, as I said earlier on, Dr. Scriven and I had a conversation that we probably should look at a demographer doing a formal enrollment study for you, either later this year. When I say later this year, not this calendar year, later this school year, or get it ready so that next year when your new enrollments come in, and you're able to then reforecast. So every year you reforecast the model based on what has happened. I don't know how accurate the projections are for Cheltenham. I can just tell you, using this model in Great Valley, we were probably 99.7, 99.8% accurate every year. We had 1 year where we dipped below 99%. And that was back in, I think it was 2008 or 2009, when the economy was going south, and the people stopped buying houses when that mortgage bubble hit, and all the people that were supposedly coming in stopped. But then it quickly caught up. We quickly were able to, the math corrects itself over a couple of years, and it was back to the way it was, at least the accuracy portion of it.
Right, and just a related, more of a comment that beyond the reduction in the number of potential projection and the reduction in the number of students over time, I think we also obviously need to, chip away below that in terms of the why and what we need to be doing differently. Not to say that we would retain all of those students, but that's a significant amount of students projected to be lost over time. And so I think we need to look beyond just the dollars and cents, but, really looking at the why.
Yeah, Mrs. Haywood, that's exactly why, with meeting with Mr. Linderman, I wanted to bring in a third party or use an additional resource, because those numbers, when this information was shared with me, it really jumped off the page. And I want to be proactive with informing you as a whole board as to exactly those questions that you're posing. So we're with you on that 100%.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you. Staying on demographics for a minute. I know in the past that we had several different organizations or entities do demographic studies, and several of them were done by the Montgomery County Planning Commission, and I used to be on the board there. I'll put a plug for them in that they're cost effective, and also they know Montgomery County pretty well, and also Cheltenham to a good degree, and also they're aware of some of the nuances in Cheltenham. And one aspect that I've been focused on over the years is that the potential, whether it comes to fruition or not, is a question about some of the bigger apartment complexes, notably the towers at Wyncote or Wingate, about those potentially becoming locations where you could, again, very potentially have a large number of students move into those units. And that could be a change where right now my belief is that those are largely made up of units of family units and college students without a lot of students there, but that potentially could change. And that could be a driving factor down the road. I also do agree with your statement about the development Ashburn Meadows, where the County Plan Commission has studies done, as does Rutgers, where surprisingly for many people, the number of students per unit is really small compared to, I think, what people think. I think people look back to their own lives or a TV sitcom from decades ago, and they assume that every house has 2 or 3 students going to school at the same time. To pivot a little bit about the audit, were there any material findings or anything of great note in the 2020 audit that we should be aware of?
No, there was nothing material wise. There will be a mention of the student activity funds and a little better oversight and following our rules. I do not believe there's any fraud or anything involved in anything like that, but we did not have anything major other than the fact that we were a year late.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Ms. Mulhern.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Mr. Linderman, quick question on this is a little easier than some of those other ones, I hope, but the student activity funds, are those accounts that are self-funded by those groups is my first question. Like they raise money in a fundraiser, that money goes into their account?
Yes, so like a more concrete example would be the ski club, goes on ski trips. So they collect money, they pay for the transportation, they buy ski lift tickets,
right.
And it all happens this year. And at the end of the year, there should be almost no money left because those students that participated this year should be spending it. And that's the way most all the clubs should be.
Right.
And you can argue that student council may be able to carry a little bit over because they run year to year, but truly only the class funds. And when we say class funds, like the class 22 now is whatever their balance is, they will have to have it zeroed out by the graduation date this year, or it will convert to the class of 2027, I guess, next, whatever the freshman class.
26, 26, I don't know. So, or do any of, I guess I'm trying to just get, I'm thinking of like, some of these smaller clubs, especially the ski club, that makes a lot of sense because each member of the ski club is paying for their dues to go on those trips. So it's a very clear, I've spent $200, that covers X, Y, and Z. But I'm just thinking of some of the other organizations where I was glad to hear you say almost zeroed out as opposed to zeroed out, just because I think there is a big difference there. It would be very difficult for a club to start every August with zero money. You can't make money if you don't have a little bit to start with. So it sounds like zero is maybe not the answer, but
It has to be, it can't be materially high.
Okay.
So for example, like where I came from, we would allow the ski club to start to keep about $200 or $300 in their account at the end of the year because they had to put deposits in, almost in July, if,
Sure.
to some of those early trips. So things like that.
No, even a couple hundred, I think that makes me
Yeah.
feel a little better. I was just feeling for those students, starting from scratch every year. But if there's that teeny bit in there, that at least it gets you going on that first fundraiser or whatever.
But we have to get some better controls over some of the
Absolutely.
the activities, and some of them collect gate receipts like the musicals and the play, and they have to really follow rules a little closer.
Oh, sure. No, that makes sense. I just wanted to clarify on that specific piece. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moran. Mr. Epps.
Hey, good evening again. Mr. Linderman, without getting into like the merits of zero-based budgeting, I'd like to ask, in the last educational affairs meeting, there was some information presented. I believe it was the like priority data plans for the schools, like the salient data, root causes, all leading up to actions that the school would take to make improvements. To what extent are those plans connected to like the budgeting process? Like if there are resources, things and actions identified in those plans, like to what extent are those connected to budget planning in this process?
Yeah, I did not attend the educational fair, so I'll have to kind of punt that to the superintendent or else. But most of the new initiatives that are brought through are budgeted through at the department level in the district office first. And then kind of, once they're implemented in the schools, then the school would need to take over as part of their budgeting process with some help from the departments. So when you're looking at a new initiative, whatever it is, you're basically saying, okay, now instead of zero, it's going to be this $100 because we want this new initiative added, or this new program added, or this new device added. I don't know if I was.
I'll jump in as well, Mr. Linderman, and Dr. Smith is also on the line, but there are set interventions that are directly affiliated or associated with each school. So based on student need, that intervention could vary based on what the data is sharing. But the principals are very aware of what resources are available. For instance, as you know from the data, there was a heavy push in math. So there may be consultants that will come in addition to those internal resources that would work specifically with targeted areas around deficits in math. So there is a crosswalk that is done and some alignment. And Dr. Smith plays a role also in terms of making sure that resources that are needed to move the instructional program are in place at each respective school. I'll let her jump in if there's anything she'd like to add, but that's also my work now that I'm doing as I'm going through this onboarding process to really see where that alignment is as we're really building out new this year with setting our strategic plan and metrics that aren't currently in place that will be in place. Anything you want to add, Dr. Smith?
No, you pretty much captured everything, and that it pretty much comes from the Office of Education. Any new resources or any new programs, we start to pay for them from the very beginning, and then the buildings pay to sustain those resources. And as Dr. Scriven mentioned, if there is something specific at a school that is needed, that is also budgeted. For example, if a school has a larger ELL population, they may need something that a school with a lower ELL population does not need. So it is very much based upon what's happening at the school. Some things go to all schools and some things are very specific to the individual needs of the students in a building. So to answer your question, yes, those initiatives and school improvement plans are taken into consideration when the budgeting process happens.
That's helpful. I appreciate all three of your responses. And Dr. Scriven, you even took it to the next step, right? In the strategic plan, and then that next connection is to the metrics. So yeah, that's, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you to the board for all of your thoughtful questions. I see no hands raised. I see no hands raised in the attendees. Does anyone else have a final question for this evening? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
move.
Do I have a second?
Second, Charles Bordeaux Williams.
This meeting is adjourned.